Hello and welcome to January's edition of Tech of the Month in association with Garmin. This month we have the opportunity for you to win a Garmin Edge 530 computer, which is pretty much Garmin's most popular GPS cycling computer. The Garmin Edge 530 offers GPS navigation, training statuses and cycling dynamics as well as Di2 compatibility. In order to be in with the chance to win, click on the link below in the video description. It'll take you to a webpage where you can answer one question. We'll keep the competition open for 3 weeks after this video goes out. In this episode, we're going to take a look at some of our favourite products from the year that's just passed, 2021, before we get properly into 2022. So each of us has two of our very favourite products that we've tested over the course of the year. Starting us off, Simon Smythe is going to talk through his favourite items.
Yeah, my favourite item of the year actually was a bike, and it was the Giant TCR Advanced Pro Zero. I tested this as part of our 5K bike group test, and it was the winner. And it was the winner by quite a long way because it was just such a great bike. I mean, I've lost count of the amount of TCRs I've actually ridden since the 90s, the bright yellow Once one. And this was the one that was the best by far, and actually not quite as loud either, luckily for that.
It sounds like you've always been a fan of the TCR. What about this TCR was so significantly better than the rest? Yeah,
I mean, I think the nice thing about the TCR is that it's always followed that compact road shape, which is the acutely sloping top tube, and the stiffness, which was always one of its big things. And this one has the same sloping top tube. I mean, maybe not quite as sloping as the original, but it still hasn't gone with the drop seat stays. And I think it's nice that, you know, when it started out, it was different from all the other bikes at the time, which had horizontal top tubes. Now it's different because everybody's gone to the dropped seat stays. But what's really good about it now is that you know, it still has that stiffness. It's aero optimized now. They've aero optimized all the tubes that they're saying, and so it's got this combination of everything: the lightweight, the stiffness, the aero as well now, and it's got just an amazing ride feel.
But it feels that it is aero, it's got aero touches, but not at the detriment of ride quality, which I think is really important, and where some bike brands go wrong.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, it's definitely, it's for riding and it's for enjoying, because Giant has the Propel, which is the aero bike anyway. So it's just really, I think it just gets the balance exactly right of just being a lovely bike to ride, a good price as well, actually. You know, we've got to think about the value for money you get, and Giant's always offered amazing value for money. For the £5,199, it had a much better spec than the other three on test, which were the Scott Addict, the Specialized Tarmac SL7 and the BMC Team Machine.
Nice. So what kind of components do you get for the money?
Well, it had the Ultegra Di2 group set, and actually, to be fair, all four of the bikes had that. But it had much better wheels. The Giant SLR1 wheels were under 1,500 grams, hookless. You know, the latest wheels. Really, none of the other wheels were as good as that.
So how deep were the wheels?
Yeah, they're 42 millimeters, the rim depth, and that's a really nice balance between aerodynamics and lightweight. They're really, really nice wheels. The others, the Specialized, had actually aluminium budget wheels. The other thing about the spec, so you've got the Ultegra Di2 group set, but you also got the dual-sided power meter with it. None of the other bikes had a power meter. And you know, one of the other really impressive things about it was the weight. It was only 7.3 kilos, and it was something in the region of 500 grams lighter than any of the other bikes on that test. I think the geometry is really good on those TCRs as well. It's like classic 73-degree parallel angles. It happened to fit me really well, which is always a bonus. But the other good thing about it is that if it didn't, so you can adjust you can change, because it's not internally routed with the cables in the bar and stem, you can swap them a bit more easily. So it's just a really user-friendly bike. Lovely ride, had everything going for it. So that was my favourite bike of 2021, the Giant TCR Pro Advanced Zero. Over to you, Stefan.
So my favourite bike of the year was also one that similarly won the group test that I did, but this was of gravel bikes, four of them, at the £3,000 mark. And so the bike in particular was the BMC Urus 1, and it came in at £2,850.
So what is it that you enjoyed about that bike so much more compared to the others?
So what I particularly liked about the BMC was its geometry. It's got that kind of slant towards progressive geometry, which we've been seeing in mountain bikes for the past 10 years now, and it's kind of being ported over towards gravel bikes in quite a lot of the recent updates.
Oh well, so what actually is progressive geometry?
So it's a number of elements of the frame. The main ones are that the top tube is lengthened, and to compensate for that, so if the shifters are where you want them, the stem is shortened a little bit, and this reduces the steering axis a little bit and makes the steering a little bit snappier, a little bit faster. But at the same time, the fork is raked out a little bit to around 70 degrees for gravel bikes. You get much slacker with mountain bikes, but gravel bikes are kind of around 70 degrees at this point. And that just makes the handling a little bit more steady. So you've got the, it's more responsive at the handlebars with a shorter stem, but with the raked out head tube, it's just not so twitchy as steeper sorts like 72 degrees.
And I guess you've also got not such a risk of toe overlap as well, because the front wheel's a bit further out.
Yeah, precisely. With road bikes, the tyres that you have, the volume isn't so great, and so with a 72-degree head angle, you're generally not going to get such bad toe overlap on the large sizes, like 54 centimeters and above. But with gravel bikes, with the larger tyres, when you're going towards 50 millimeters in width, the volume increases, and so the depth of the tyre increases quite a lot. And with those slacker head angles, not only does it help with the handling, it also means that you don't get such bad toe overlap, which is an annoyance on a road bike, but it can be the difference between having to get off and walk up a particularly steep climb or not on a gravel bike.
All right, so the other bikes in the test didn't have the progressive geometry then?
Some of them did to a certain degree, but the BMC was really the one that sort of embodied it most fully, for want of a better term.
I remember reading a lot about shorter chain stays being much better for razzing around the forest. That was something that seemed to be a really big takeaway. How much did that sort of impact the experience for you on that bike?
That really added into things. So not only is it more controlled at the front with the shorter stem and the raked out head angle, at the rear end, the chain stays are 425 millimeters, and this just makes the bike feel that much more snappy when you're railing it around the corners. When you're going over routes, the rear end doesn't feel like it's being hooked up almost, like it's so far behind you. This feels, it's much more tucked underneath, and really helps for the tighter trails and tighter corners.
So what about the group set, the spec compared to the other bikes?
So it comes with SRAM's 4th tier group set, the Apex group set, but this is still 1x11, and so other bikes in the group test was coming with equally Shimano's 4th tier group set, but at that level you're going down to 10 speed at the rear. It broadly gave enough range for gravel riding. If I was to go on more of a gravel tour, a multi-day trip, I would want to attach a smaller chainring just to get slightly lower gear for steep climbs when heavily laden. For day-to-day riding about, the gearing that it came with was broadly fine, but at least with a 1x system it's quite easy to make those adjustments to the gearing, whereas with a 2x with those two chain rings, trying to make those adjustments is a little bit more difficult, but you can fine-tune the BMC.
My favourite bike of the year was the LANGMA Advanced Pro Disc 1. I also tested the SL version wearing red ETAP, but of the two, I felt that the former was really better value for money. We did actually have quite a long discussion between Simon and I as to whether it were too repetitive to include the TCR and the LANGMA, as they are very, very similar bikes, and Liv is obviously Giant's sister company. They share a lot of resources, and there are a great many similarities between the bikes, although Liv will swear blind that it is its own bike and its own platform, and doesn't take a lot from the TCR. I went on the launch of the first ever Liv LANGMA in 2017, so at that point it was a 2018 model. Now admittedly I did ride the rim brake version as opposed to the disc brake version we've got here, but although I felt it was very lightweight and it was really comfortable, so I didn't dislike the bike, it just didn't have the stiffness I wanted from a race bike. This newer iteration, they've increased the stiffness quite dramatically, specifically at the fork, they say by 50%. Wow. And that's quite huge. And absolutely, as soon as I got on the bike, before I'd read any press releases or any information about what they'd done, and immediately just felt like a significantly better bike than the one I'd ridden back in 2017.
You also rode the higher level, the SL version. Was that actually noticeable, or are these two bikes essentially on a par, or is this one preferable in being a little bit more compliant?
They're very on a par. They're very, very similar. There is a difference because I rode both a lot over the summer. I raced the SL a lot, and I used the Advanced Pro a lot on club runs. But to be honest, I could have done it the other way, and I would have raced the Advanced Pro and really had no issue. I think the majority of the difference is going to come down to the wheels. So the wheels on the SL Pro are the Cadex 36s, whereas you've got Giants. Well, Cadex is Giants brands, but you've got the slightly lower level Giant wheels in the same depth, but they're just that bit heavier, and that's going to make the difference. So I'd say between the two bikes, that's the most noticeable difference, and that's what changed the ride quality the most. And obviously the group set, I mean, between SRAM Red and mechanical Tegra, clearly the shifting's just not as quick.
Yeah, but then, there's going to be quite a difference in the price. And so what does this bike actually come at, and how does the components compare to other bikes at a similar level? So
it comes in at $3,999. So once again, I think Giant is just really shining in its value for money, because you've got a power meter included, you've got Ultegra, you've got carbon hookless rims, you've got a carbon seat post, you've got an aluminium stem and handlebar, which is two-piece. I would always choose an aluminium, actually, because if you're going to race a bike, this is a race bike, at some point you're probably going to crash, right? If you're going to do a whole season of racing, probably going to be a crash at some point. Certainly over a few seasons, and it's always handlebars that hit the floor. So I personally would never go for carbon handlebars as a preference. So
what about the weight of this? Is it light, like the TCR was the lightest in my group test?
Interesting question, actually. The SL disc version came in at 6.7 kg, which is a really lightweight bike for a disc bike. However, it is retailing over $10,000, over £10,000. Once you get into five figures, those bikes are all very lightweight, and they can all hit the UCI limit of around 6.8. So I wouldn't say it's head and shoulders better than anyone else. I'm sure Giant might disagree. However, the Advanced Pro 1 at $3,999 comes in at 7.6 kg, and I have the size small, which I do think is more competitive than other bikes at the same kind of price point. But I think it's similar to what you found at that price point. Giant is just better, is more able to be more competitive, probably because they've got their own factory. Everything is so in-house. More elements are under their control.
Yeah.
Well, that's each of our favourite bikes from 2021. We're moving on to products now.
Okay, so my favourite product of the year was the WATTBIKE Atom Next Generation. And this is kind of an unusual one because I didn't actually review it. And and I actually bought it with my own money just because I wanted one and I wanted to keep it. I didn't want to give it back. Normally, obviously, we have to give the products back that we test, but this time I really wanted it. And this is based on the other Cycling Weekly reviews. So I had a good chat with Steve Shrubsall and Dave Bradford, who have both used them. And it just sounded like a really good investment to me. Indoor training is something that people are doing more and more of. I was doing a lot of it in 2020. And I just thought, why not invest in a decent indoor setup?
So there are quite a few indoor training bikes. There's the Tax one, the Wahoo one. What is it that attracted you to the WATTBIKE Atom in particular? First of all, I was thinking about the cost.
And the WATTBIKE compared to the Tax and the Wahoo is under £2,000, whereas those are the Wahoo is just under 3,000. It's like 2,999, and then the Tax 2,299. So I set out looking at that, and I compared the two specs, and the WATTBIKE looked like the best on paper. It has the 25% maximum resistance, maximum incline, which matches the Tax and is a bit better than the Wahoo. It looked like it had the same type of magnetic resistance. This is something new that WATTBIKE had done with the next generation version. The original one had mechanical resistance. Now it's electromagnetic, and they say it's their own system. So it's going to make it sort of smoother and quieter. The gear changes are more responsive apparently than before, although I didn't ride the original WATTBIKE. But the 22 gears that it has changed pretty swiftly and pretty positively for me.
One of the really attractive things about indoor bikes, as opposed to using a turbo trainer, is that more than one person in the household can use it without swapping everything over. So how easy do you find the adjustments? Are they nice and smooth or a bit clunky?
It's pretty easy actually, and there's a scale so that you can get your seat post height exactly right. You can adjust the reach and you can adjust the handlebar height exactly as you like. And the levers are really tactile. They're big and chunky, really positive moving, and no slippage either. You know, you end up sort of doing some quite big efforts, and you could sort of knock the seat post down, but it doesn't. It's really the whole thing is really solid. And actually, talking of solid, I mean, it weighs 44 kilos. So once it's in your house, it's definitely not going anywhere.
Have there been any little niggles or anything that you're not so happy with?
No, I mean, I guess I was a bit worried that it was going to get really sweated up. The casing is really nicely sealed. The power cable is nicely tucked away underneath where the drips can't get to it. So that would have been a big worry. And but apart from that, I haven't had any problems with it at all. I think this is one of the other good reasons to get yourself a proper indoor bike like that, is because I pretty much sweated the old bike to death that I was using on the turbo. It just got completely rusted, and you know, when I tried to get the stem out, the stem had seized in, and you know, it's cleaner. It's just a cleaner solution to have an indoor bike. Although it weighs 44 kilos, it actually takes up less space physically in a room. It's only 100 centimeters long, which is kind of like the wheelbase of a standard bike, but without the wheels. So, you know, it's that much shorter. It's 50 centimeters wide. So it can just go in the corner of one of your rooms if you have a spare room, or even in a shed. And it really doesn't take up too much space.
So my favourite product for the year is the DT Swiss GR1600 Spline wheel set. I used these wheels for doing the South Downs Double, which is a 200-mile gravel trail in the south of England. Previously, it's mainly been done by mountain bikes, and so gravel is right on the gravel bike is right on the cusp of what you can really take onto the trail. The rocks are really, really quite large on the South Downs Way.
Oh, you've got some pretty wide tyres on now. What is the internal measurement on those?
So they're 24 millimetres, which is quite a common width for gravel tyres these days. They've been getting steadily wider, and you can certain brands are going wider still. I think that it's for most gravel tyres, if you're going for 650B times 47 millimetres, that's a really, really good pairing. For 2.1 inches, which is about 53 millimetres, they still support the sidewalls quite nicely. I think that you might be better off maybe going like a little bit wider if possible. But they still make a pretty good pairing with the tyres that I put on. If
you were to ride these, I assume you've ridden them since, and sometimes in winter, I mean, how good is the hub longevity? Do you think that they would last, you really would hope they'd last a full winter. Would they last several?
So with this exact wheel set, I've only had it for about 6 months now, and so I wouldn't want to pass verdict on the hubs just yet, but I've actually been using the hub set from the model down on my own gravel bike for the past year now, and so that's had a whole winter and kind of like a half at this point. And with those, they're spinning just as smoothly as the day that I bought them. It's really quite impressive. And seal cartridge bearings, and so fairly easy to get replacements and pop them out when it does come time to change. But I feel like having ridden these wheels now, I'm quite sad that I did go for the model down, the step down for my own gravel bike, because it's only like a very minor point and probably doesn't affect the performance of the wheel set at all. But on the model down, you've got a traditional pull system for the free hub, and so you've got the free pulls, and then that spins around within the free hub, and very traditional. But with the DT Swiss, as they've had for quite a while, they've got that ratchet system with all of the teeth that engage simultaneously, and it's just a more mechanically pleasing system than a pull system, and so just for the sort of satisfaction of riding around and sort of knowing that that's what's going on inside your hub, I wish that I'd spent a little bit more and got the model up and have that technology inside.
Is it mainly psychological though? Can you actually feel or sort of notice any difference whatsoever?
I'm sure that it's 100% psychological, but one thing that I do notice with this one in particular is that the engagement is only 20 degrees. The number of teeth that they have as the stock setup is quite low. And on the one hand, with fewer teeth, that means they're like a little bit larger. You're going to get a bit more longevity, but it does mean that when you're in the very lowest gears, you can notice quite a slow pickup at the cranks. It's less marked than with a mountain bike, say, where the gears are a little bit lower, and so the actual movement at the crank arms is even greater. It's like amplified. But at the same time, when you're riding a gravel bike with a particularly low set of gears, you do notice that a little bit. But it is upgradable. You can go to 15 or 10 degrees if that's something that does really, really annoy you. But it does mean that you potentially sacrifice a little bit of the longevity, so it's a bit of a trade-off there. The other thing that I really like about the wheels is the spokes and the ones that have been chosen. And so these, they're not J-bend, they're straight pull spokes. But what's quite nice is that they're also aero-bladed. And now this doesn't help you too much when it comes to gravel guiding, sort of a marginal gain there. But what it does mean is that when it comes to adjusting the spokes, when it comes time to adjusting the spokes, I haven't needed to yet, but it means that you can clamp the spoke in place and then tighten the nipple, whereas on a round spoke with a straight pull system, it has a tendency to kind of like spin in the socket, and it's just a complete pain to adjust. And so not only are the bearings quite nice, quite user-friendly, I've service spokes for the adjustment, and so it's just quite a nice system to live with, and especially with the free hub as well. Everything is just quite simple and quite effective, which I've very much enjoyed.
Last up, my favourite product for this year was SRAM's rival ETAP GROUPSET. Obviously, there have been some other really high-profile GROUPSET launches this year. I would wager that actually, Ultegra and Durace were quite iterational, and Rival pretty much ripped up the rulebook. Not only that, it's also relevant to more people because it is at a price point that more people are going to be actually shopping at. What was so great about Rival is it brought electronic gearing to a lower tier. Now, of course, it did boost up the price of that lower tier. So Rival is now significantly more expensive than Shimano 105, but the experience you're getting is very, very different. And actually, it's very similar to SRAM Force, which we'd already given that an excellent review. We said it was, performed pretty flawlessly. And this is every bit as good performance-wise. I mean, if you put me on Force and you put me on Rival, sent me out for a ride, I think I'd be quite hard-pressed to find the difference. There is a difference in weight. Yeah. So that was a major criticism of Rival, that it's heavy. And yes, it is heavy compared to mechanical options. So it comes in at 3,205 grams. We did strip it all off the bike. We weighed every single component. That's what we got. Force comes in at 2,978 grams. And 105 is 2,478 grams. So yes, it is a lot heavier. Yeah. It is. But you don't need to replace you've got no cables. You don't need to replace your cables. It's much easier if you're going to be running a fully integrated system as well. And those are more and more common. Electronic gearing is, before Rival came out, I was very much pro-mechanical because it's cheaper, it's lighter, and I didn't really see a problem with it. And there isn't a problem with it. I'm still very happy riding mechanical. But just bringing the price point down, I think, makes a really huge difference. And when you compare, like a mechanical 105 versus Rival, I mean, the shifting's just so much quicker. And also, as you get a power meter as well, for if you add up just a little extra. So for 1,516 pounds, you get 2x with a power meter, or it's 1,314 pounds without.
Yeah, there's just so many things I think about the GROUPSET, like just little things that make it that much more user-friendly almost. When it comes to troubleshooting the gear shifts, you don't have to worry about whether the cable is sticky. If the gears aren't shifting properly, then it's either not indexed properly or you've got a bent hanger, and then you can go through the process of fixing that. Whereas when it comes to having a cable, you might end up recabling your entire bike thinking that it was down to a sticky cable, and then find out that actually it was the hanger and that just needed straightening out, and you've just gone to the faff of having an internally routed bike and replaced all the cables off. And so that's something that I find is quite nice about electronic GROUPSETs in general.
On the rear mech point, that was the other thing that really I thought was exciting about Rival, was that previously electronic rear mechs have been disproportionately expensive, to the point that a rear mech is a thing that is very easily damaged in a crash in a race. It's very easily damaged putting a bike in a car. And those are the things that people do often. They've always been, £800, like really the kind of, what am I going to do about this situation kind of purchase, not like, oh, that's annoying. The Rival rear mech's £236, so it significantly brings the price down, and is also compatible with Force and ETAP, which is even better because if you do have one of those expensive GROUPSETs, you do have an option. Yeah, it's going to be a bit heavier, but not the worst thing in the world. Yeah. And actually longevity is another important point. We were talking about this earlier, in that It's very commonly said that the more expensive group tests will last longer. It's a very popular sentiment, you read it in most GROUPSET reviews. I'm not sure it's entirely always true, because on a cheaper GROUPSET, it's heavier because there's more material. Unless there's different treatments and so on that can make a difference. There isn't really a longevity issue, I think, with Rival or with 105. I hope that you enjoyed January's edition of Tech of the Month in association with Garmin. What were your favourite products over 2021? Let us know in the comments, we'd really love to hear. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit the like button and subscribe if you'd like to see more of our content. We'll see you next month for February's Tech of the Month.